the man, the myth, the legend joining us on this very special day. Brandon Dent, a.k.a. Detroit Kool-Aid, beat writer for Woodward Sports, covers the Detroit Pistons. Wait, hold on. You got a beanie on.
Hey, look, man.
Is this
It's an homage of Mr. Jeff Hardy. I heard all of the kind words from the chats last time. I, too, want to be a candle and a soap maker, Jeff.
Yeah, well, just be prepared. They're going to accuse you of writing a screenplay. You know, they're going to accuse you of maybe being in a drum club, whatever it is.
Drum club?
Yeah, whatever. Whatever they were throwing at me.
OG Nick Cannon, man.
OG Nick Cannon. Well, it's nice to have you, Brandon, man. I'm excited because we have the Red Wings. They're 5-1-1. We're seeing success with the Red Wings. The Pistons aren't as far as the Red Wings, but still they're on the right path, as many of us would say. But I want to ask you first, because in recent news, some players that are expected to not be there or be available tonight and potentially for their home opener, Bojan Bogdanovic, he's dealing with a calf injury, which at first it was mild, but now it's expected to miss up to 4 weeks. And then you have
Monty Morris.
Monty Morris. Can you speak to some of those injuries and who will be out?
Man, the thing that kind of worries me about those injuries is that all of those players can shoot the three pretty well. And when you're talking about trying to put some type of spacing, not just around Cade, but also for that second unit, that could have some type of effect on how this team starts off the season. But given the starters that we kind of saw throughout preseason, I believe giving those guys extended minutes and mixing in players, if Jaden Ivey's coming off the bench, mixing in players like that, I think that they can overcome a little bit, but they're going to have to shoot it well, starting with Cade Cunningham.
Ooh, nice segue there. So
He's a pro.
I agree with you that the losses that the Pistons are gonna be, the players are gonna be without. The 3-point shooting is what concerns me. Do you think a guy like Cade Cunningham can pick up some of the slack? Because people forget at Oklahoma State he was a 40% 3-point shooter, and with healthy legs, do you think that's something that he can add to his game more?
I do. That's something that he works on a lot. You know, when the parts of practice that we get to see Cade Cunningham from the start of training camp to where he's been as of late, he's not missing any of these threes that he's taken in his in this thing. And the one thing I've noticed about his 3-point shot is that the arc is much better. He talked about it at the exit interviews and then at media day as well. He said coming from college to the NBA, for some reason his shot flattened out. Yeah. Listen, I like John Beilein. I really do. I love John Beilein. Shout out to Coach B.
But Easy doesn't like that comment.
But I believe that players like Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, their shots are starting to look a little bit better. Even Killian Hayes to a degree, Asar Thompson even. We didn't know what he was going to be as a 3-point shooter coming into the league, but I do believe Cade is going to pick up the slack this year.
Yeah, that's a great point about Cade too. His shot was flat, and now it seems like, man, he can be a close to 40% 3-point shooter. We saw that in college. He shot 40%. Yeah. There's more there, because we talk about shooting. It's also on Cade as well, and I think he will improve there. My next question, what's your expected Kool-Aid? What's your expected starting lineup? What would you go with? Because the interesting thing, and I'm seeing people talk about it a lot, is kind of spacing out the shooting, no pun intended, but trying to get shooters on the bench, shooters in the starting lineup. How would you, especially now with Monte out, who's a 40% shooter, close to from 3, and then Bojan, who's a walking bucket, 40% shooter from 3. How would you, what starting lineup would you roll with tonight?
I think they go with Killian, Cade, Asar, Stu, and Duren. I know that it's not the one that spaces the floor the best, but we did get to see that lineup a couple times, and the defense was just on point. And honestly, as much as I want them to be able to space the floor, I haven't really seen this young team since maybe a little stint of Jeremy Grant play that type of a defense in a long time. And honestly, it was addicting, bro. We saw them kind of keep OKC to like 15 points with about 3 to 4 minutes left in the first quarter, and they were suffocating defense. We saw Asar Thompson getting out into the transition. We saw Killian Hayes getting rebounds. We saw Asar getting rebounds. We saw Cade getting out in transition, to the point that even if they were missing some shots, they gave themselves extra opportunities by playing great defense, and that's what Monty Williams has been preaching throughout. That's kind of what I want to see tonight, and I don't want to leave that second unit while they're thin on shooters without shooters. On the bench, you're going to have more like specialty players. In the starting lineup, you're going to have probably your more dynamic players, and off that bench, I don't want Ivy with no driving lanes. That's one thing. I think Cade, he can fend a little bit better. We want spacing around him, but we've seen him be that man without spacing around him.
Right.
Ivy, I want him to have a little bit more spacing around him with Joe Harris on the bench with him, because it's tempting. And potentially Alec Burks. I wouldn't be surprised to see A. Burks start, because I know Monty likes to mix in the vets. but I kind of want them to go with that all defensive lineup and just rebound, defend, get out in transition, and then let Cade cook.
So what's the ordeal, and what do you think the plan is with Ivy here? Is it more of him having to prove himself to get in that starting lineup, or they just see him as a better fit coming off the bench with his energy, number one, but two, his ability to score quickly? You have some guys coming off the bench like an Ivy, better than a Killian. I mean, he's a better player at this point in time. Is that the reasoning? What's the pathway if Ivy were to get in a starting lineup? How would that work?
When you're talking about this core four of things, you go all the way back to the OKC core four, and we've talked about this for 2 years, 3 years since Troy Weaver was brought on. Is he going to be able to replicate some aspect of that, and is he going to be able to make it work? And to be able to make it work when you have that many guards sometimes, and playmakers and dynamic scorers, one has to, and you would want one to come off the bench. The names that we've heard are names like Ginobili, among others. I think that he does fit best within this core off of the bench right now, and to be able to come in like he's shot out of a cannon and just go to work, because he's a guy who's very, very kind of ISO heavy. He's a guy that can have that type of success. We saw him do it last year when the team was like him, Duren, and like Eugene Omoruyi and the rest of the Motor City Crews. And he was out there getting up games where I don't even know how he was getting to 10, 11 assists in some of those games in the second half of the season. But he's shown that he's a pretty dynamic player with the ball in his hands. And even in this preseason, the first one, he came right off the bench and just went to work. His job was just attack the basket, keep your head up for the rim, and if you see your teammate open, get him the ball. And that's something that Jaden Ivey is good at. And I do believe that if somebody in that starting lineup is not really playing right or hitting the shots or anything of that nature, he did shoot 34% from three last year. He was 37%, I believe, in catch and shoot threes as well. So it's not like Jaden Ivey is a total miss in that starting lineup if he played. I just think that along with Cade Cunningham and Asar Thompson, I think it takes away a little bit of Jaden Ivey's creative ability to just kind of go and put pressure on the defense.
Yeah, speaking of Jaden Ivey, this is a 3-part question. The first couple are quick, and then I want you to elaborate more. So do you think Jaden Ivey is this being off the bench thing? Do you foresee it being a long-term thing or short-term?
Oh, that's the thing. Hey, that's a tough question, man, to answer, because I personally would like to see him start.
Sure.
I really would. But I understand the fit of it all. I understand the dynamic, because if they can make it work, that to me is actually what's best for their team. I
mean, in that vein, do you think Jaden Ivey gets starters minutes regardless?
Yes, I definitely do.
So if that's the case, if Jaden Ivey is long term coming off the bench and he gets starters minutes, is he the type of guy that can maybe compete for a 6th man of the year, at least during the time that he's coming off the bench?
I do. And the one thing that's interesting, people always say, well, it's not who starts, it's who finishes.
Sure.
But what's the philosophy behind that? I think that Monty Williams is going to take each and every game and all of the practice to see who's defending the best. So if Ivey's going out there and putting in that work on the offensive end of the court and the defensive end of the court, I could see him being the guy that finishes those games. And yeah, I do. I think he's a prime candidate for somebody to be able to win a 6th man of the year award.
All right.
And another thing too with the whole Ivy stuff, because you mentioned with Killian starting, which I've seen that floating around as well. Does it make more sense that way because Cade's been getting off-ball reps, which would work with a guy like Ivy, but is it because of Asar and his development, him being such a great playmaker, where that kind of because you could argue, well, if Cade's playing off-ball, then put Ivy in the starting lineup. He could play off of Ivy, but then you have a guy like Asar who's a great playmaker, so you don't really need Ivy at this time. Is that like if Killian were not to start, who's next up? Like, would they put an Alec Burks in there? Or would Ivy be next up?
They've been putting Alec Burks in there for fit, though. Not necessarily because of who's the better player, the more dynamic player, but just because of fit. They want to be able to have some type of three-point shooter in that lineup if they lose too many guys from that lineup, because now you're not able to put the same type or level of defense out there. So you're going to have to compensate and make up for it in other ways, and one of those ways is trying to shoot the ball. These are great questions, because the Pistons have, in my opinion, a good problem when they drafted Asar Thompson, and that's something that leading up to the draft, Troy Weaver talked about there being this home run pick, and when he got Asar Thompson, he said that was the pick. I wonder what would have happened if he didn't get Asar Thompson, if it was a player that he deemed a little bit lesser down his board. What would have happened? Because those players would have fit that we were looking at the four position, Jarris Walker, Taylor Hendricks, and Ivy's probably still starting today. But Asar Thompson, he's been wowing people. Even the stuff we see him do just on the sidelines, his athleticism. Just in shoot-around, his athleticism, just the way he dribbles, he's shifty.
Yeah.
I didn't really see that level of it even in his overtime elite days. But he's such a dynamic player. And the one thing that's crazy is when you see like Asar, Cade, and Killian standing next to each other, and you realize that 1 through 3, and they're all interchangeable, is a legit 6'5" to 6'7" across the board. And
right.
All of them can handle, all of them can play make, and all of them can marginally knock down a 3 from what we saw in preseason.
And I can't sit here, and even though we talked about what would be a better fit before the draft, like a Jarris Walker, a Taylor Hendricks, I'm not blind to the fact that, you took the best player available, which is the right thing to do when you're not a good team. You took the best player available, and on top of that, he can guard the best offensive player on the other team, which, like, Hendricks ain't doing that. He ain't guarding the best 1 or 2. Yeah, exactly. Like, Asar can do that, so it makes sense. Tonight, though, they travel to Miami to take on the Heat. What are some things you're looking to see? Like, it doesn't have to be, the end-all, be-all, but some things you're keying in on watching the game tonight.
Really, I want to see if Asar Thompson can kind of keep up this I do everything role. Is he getting his hands into the passing lane? Is he still grabbing the rebounds at a high clip, 8, 9, 10 rebounds? Is he defending well? Because Jimmy Butler and some of those guards that they have, some of the wings, it's not necessarily the easiest fit. I know that Miami has some players out. I forgot who's out tonight, but that's going to make it just slightly easier on the Pistons. And I'm looking to see what Cade is going to be like. Notoriously, he starts games, I feel kind of weird saying slow, because he's actually looking for his teammates. So I feel like if his teammates are hitting shots, if the pick and rolls are solid, we wouldn't see this as necessarily him starting slow. And so that's what I'm looking forward to see. If his teammates are going to pick him up tonight, what the defense is looking like, and if Asar Thompson can continue to look like the player that we saw throughout preseason. And obviously Killian Hayes.
Yeah.
This is a guy who for the last 2 preseasons now, we're like, okay, that's our guy. We see him. He's finally going to live up somewhere, maybe halfway to his 7th round pick. Maybe look like a low 1st round pick at the very least. And last year's preseason, he went from, I think, tied for field goal attempts, either leading or tied for field goals made, and he looked like that player we wanted to see. And as soon as the regular season hit, it fell off a cliff to historically bad lows, like worst player like ever type lows, averaging like more fouls than points and things of that nature. And I remember Dwayne Casey said it was like some switch was flipped off when they had to figure out a way to get it back. The thing that I've noticed this season with Killian Hayes is he has put on a little bit of muscle. He even has a little mustache now. Shout out Lucas. And and the one thing I've noticed, remember we talked about this, that Monty Williams is about playing with force and attacking the basket with force. He wants to put people to the rim. If you look through preseason, Killian Hayes has been doing something we've been screaming for him to do for his entire career. Go to the basket like you're 6'5", bro. You're 6'5".
Yeah.
Like, go to the rack with force, and he's been doing that, playing through contact instead of the little push shot that we used to see him do, the little left-handed one I did with my right hand.
Yeah.
He ain't doing that. But his ability to get to the basket with both hands, play through the physicality and the contact, play off the bumps. We've seen him hit a couple mid-ranges and get assists from inside the paint. He's not shying away from contact. If he keeps that up, I think we'll see a very, very serviceable Killian Hayes, because it doesn't matter if he got 11 and 6 last year. Good, you kind of rebounded. We need consistency. We need toughness. We need your defense, because he hangs his head whenever his offense fails.
No, I think one of the more interesting storylines tonight is definitely the Killian Hayes storyline. Like, I'm interested in that. I'm not interested in Killian,
you
though.
are.
I'm not interested in Killian. That thumbnail Ryan made, a little questionable. I don't know if you saw that Kool-Aid, but it was not.
When you're
Shout out to
Killian
the
Hayes'
genius,
biggest fan,
I'm not. What?
You got to show out.
I'm
for
interested in the storyline. I'm not interested in Killian. There's a difference there. All right.
I think the last thing too, one other thing, I'm wondering what they're going to do with Isaiah Stewart. Like, if his shot attempts were for preseason to see what type of player he can be, and if they're going to dial that down back to take the shot if you're completely open and if the situation calls for it. Because in preseason, he wasn't necessarily doing it when the situation called for it. It seemed like he was trying to put those shots up to see what his proficiency actually was, and that's what you do in preseason. I want to see if they kind of dial that back a little bit more and play him more to a traditional role on the offense of a 4, not necessarily a stretch forward, but just kind of dynamic pick and rolls and things of that nature. So It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, great stuff, Brandon. Man, Wednesdays with Kool-Aid. That's good. Something we're gonna start doing every single Wednesday. We got Tuesdays with Matt Broder, Wednesdays with Kool-Aid, and we got Thursdays with the Doc, John Macaroon.
Wow.
We're getting some guys here, the stable parts of this morning show. So I appreciate you, Brandon. You do great work. You'll be down there Saturday as well at the home opener because I think I'll be down there.
We'll have a lot of people down there.
Yeah, Sean and Troy will be down there from half court. We got Lucas and Boone going down there as well. It'll be a lot of fun. So if you're down at LCA, man, come say hey, what's up to us. But where can people find you?
Hey, as always, at Detroit Kool-Aid. And you know what?
Yeah, look at the
Woodward
merch,
Pistons.
too. The merch, man.
Definitely. Shout out to JB. That shirt is so fire, bro. And as always, man, Woodward Sports.
He's like, yeah, I know.
Woodward Sports and WoodwardSports.com, man. This is the mothership. This is the flagship. And we're trying to do great things for not just the city of Detroit, but anybody who loves Detroit sports.
And there you have it, guys. Again, you can catch Kool-Aid, more of him on Woodward Pistons. And if you want to get some of that merch, it's Woodward Sports at the shop. You got Woodward Pistons stuff. You can be like JB and Kool-Aid. Mine is in the wash. I couldn't wear mine today, but I love my shirt as well. I got to get more. I got to get more Woodward Pistons shirts. I do.
It's okay.
Let's go to
on the channel.
Oh, yeah, of course. All right, we'll go to break. We come back. We'll talk more about the just the Pistons, our expectations for not only tonight, but the season coming up itself. But first, Sam Flannel, could you tell everybody where you can kind of relieve the stress if you watch the Pistons absolutely?